what's being so hotly debated in Christian circles is the fact that the Harry Potter books and movie feature a variety of occult themes, including witchcraft and magical violence, and, in the opinion of many, actually promote these beliefs and practices which are patently unacceptable to Christian morality. And most writers agree that Lewis and Tolkien are far superior to J.K. Rowling and recommend them, like Coulson. Many more have actually favorably compared the Harry Potter books to C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. Let me say that the similarities between Lewis and Rowling's books are merely superficial. Both are fantasy literature featuring English school children, but one is designed to create a thirst for Jesus and for heaven, while the other may create a thirst for power and manipulation. C.S. Lewis writes from a strong Christian worldview, and J.K. Rowling writes from, with all respect to Chuck Colson, an occultist and materialist worldview that leaves God out of the picture. Amidst all of this hubbub, one thing I've observed is that the arguments that seem the most reasonable and well thought out tend to be on the side of caution regarding the Potter series. Whereas, on the other hand, the pro-Harry Potter articles, like Father Carpenter's, seem to lack any really substantive consideration of the deeper issues involved. Admittedly painting with a broad brush, one can sum up their attitude as consisting mainly of, "Oh, come on now. Let's not be fanatical. I mean, after all, it's wonderful to see kids so enthusiastic about reading, isn't it?" Which, of course, is really no argument at all, because there's all sorts of popular things we should be awfully cautious about letting our kids embrace. And honestly, let's face it, kids are very often the most enthusiastic precisely about those things that are unhealthy for them. Remember Lindy Beam's comment. We have committed a fault of logic in saying that reading about witches and wizards necessarily translates into these occult practices. I wonder how she feels about pornography. I mean, reading fantasies about immoral sexual acts doesn't necessarily translate into actual immoral sexual activity, right? I mean, no one in their right mind would say that reading softcore pornography would lead to hardcore porn or sexually deviant materials, would they? Well, of course they would. And they would be speaking with the voice of bitter experience. Take, for example, John Andrew Murray, who is a colleague of Lindy Beam's at Teachers in Focus. He has a somewhat more critical opinion of Harry. Quote, "By disassociating magic and supernatural evil, it becomes possible to portray occult practices as good and healthy, contrary to the scriptural declaration that such practices are detestable to the Lord. This, in turn, opens the door for kids to become fascinated with the supernatural, while tragically failing to seek or recognize the one true source of supernatural good, namely God. What comes across," he says, "is a kind of dualism. The idea that there are two equal, uncreated, antagonistic forces, one good and one evil, and that choosing between the two is purely a matter of personal opinion." Now, as well as being a contributor to Teachers in Focus, John Murray is an English teacher and headmaster at St. Timothy's Hale in Raleigh, North Carolina. In a recent article, he relates a writing assignment he once gave to a high school English class. Having asked the class to write an original ending for an old episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, he was horrified by the blood and gore slasher movie plots they turned in. He writes, "When I expressed my concern to the students, they defended their compositions, insisting that media violence had no effect. After all, they said, they understood that the killings they saw on TV and movies were fake. But when I asked them how they would feel if they saw a TV program in which a dog was machine-gunned, they expressed their disgust in unison. That presented me with a chance to make a simple point. The reason they found the shooting death of a dog so horrible is because they hadn't been desensitized to it, as they were to the murder of a human. So how does this relate to teaching Harry Potter? With the growing popularity of youth-oriented TV shows on witchcraft, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Charmed, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a generation of children is becoming desensitized to the occult. But with Hollywood's help, Harry Potter will likely surpass all these influences, potentially reaping some grave spiritual consequences. In fact, what my own experience has indicated is that those Catholics who tend to be on the pro-Harry Potter side typically have had no personal experience with the occult, while those who were either involved with the occult at one time, like myself, Tony Collins, Steve Wood, Betty Brennan, to name a few, tend to be among those who are the most concerned about Harry Potter. John Gibson, whose conversion from neo-paganism to Catholicism appears in Surprised by Truth 2, wrote, "First and foremost, most people who have been involved in the occult still have something like a fingerprint of it on their soul. it gives us a kind of sensitivity to the occult that others don't have. Well, I agree. In all humility, I was a bright kid and a voracious reader at an early age. In the 4th grade, I read all the school library had on Greco-Roman mythology. By the 6th grade, I had read the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Tales of King Arthur, admittedly in an abridged form, which is to say they left in the sex and violence but took out all the Catholicism, and then graduated to what were called sword and sorcery novels, fantasy books. In junior high, I started reading the Mary Stuart Merlin trilogy and eventually found myself reading Edgar Cayce, Ruth Montgomery, and classic occult titles like Joseph J. Weed's Wisdom of the Mystic Masters and Aleister Crowley's Theory and Practice of Magic. Now, I know that fantasy literature can lead a young person into the occult because it's part of the story of my life. And I can guarantee that while the majority of kids who read Harry Potter books or play with Ouija boards or read their horoscope may never fall into major spiritual deceptions, thousands or maybe millions will find their experience with Harry Potter an entry point into actual occult involvement. Now, if you think I'm being an alarmist, many libraries now put their occult section next to the Potter books to make access easier for young readers. Like it or not, millions of children, including Catholic children, are being steeped in activities that are extremely dangerous, both spiritually and psychologically, and Harry Potter is providing the role model.